headquarters here in Istanbul, Turkey. Thank you for joining us today and welcome to our visual online training program. It should be noted that the training session will last for 45 to 50 minutes and Q&A session is 25 minutes. Our today's topic is State the World's Volunteerism Report, the threat that binds us. Young people, I know you have so many questions on our topic today. So if you want to ask a question, just raise your hands as usual. You all know the procedures. Please and please don't forget to mute your microphone during the session as well. Dear sisters and brothers, before we begin, I would like to mention the topics that we recently covered since we started this online volunteering training program. We covered what is volunteering and who is a volunteer, volunteering management and leadership, volunteerism for sustainability, that is under the education pillar of the SDG, universal volunteering ethics, effective online volunteering, youth volunteering initiatives, and stories, best practices in humanitarian aid. I would also like to inform our viewers and audience that we are live on the ICYF Facebook page, YouTube, and Twitter as well. Distinguished participants, respected viewers and audience, our special speaker for today is Ms. Neil Memisholo, a brilliant and well-known trainer. She is the country coordinator of the United Nations Volunteer here in Turkey. Thank you, Ms. Neil, for joining us today. We are very excited to have you again. And I just want to first ask, how are you doing?
Sorry, let me unmute myself. Hello, merhaba to everyone again. I'm happy to be back. And I wish I actually joined your journey with all these titles that you mentioned: volunteerism and leadership, universal volunteerism, ethics, best practices. I think I will also check your YouTube channel and go through the presentations.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, it's very amazing, the whole items that you just mentioned, titles. And yeah, I hope our audience is, I'm sure, is more ready to, more acknowledged by volunteerism by now.
Of course.
And hope to have a more debates, discussions.
Yeah, interactive session, inshallah. Yes. So I'm leaving the floor to you, Ms. Neil.
Okay,
you can start.
And my best to Istanbul.
Thank you very much.
You're based in Istanbul, right?
Yeah, yes, I am based in Istanbul here. Okay.
That's great. Well, thank you so much for handing over to me. Hello to everyone again. And I hope everybody's doing good. I see many happy faces, and it means that everybody's in good health, inshallah. Before I start my presentation, I always have this before I start. I want to hear your reflections on the previous days. I know that you also had chance to listen online volunteering from my colleague Dina, and also other professors on volunteerism. What has been, is there anything changed in your life since you started the ICYF forum? I don't know, like, have you been, became a member of online volunteering platform, for instance? Yeah, I see this, some heads are shaking now. Okay, well, and some responses. Okay, thank you. Today, I will be sharing a report with you. Actually, I gave some facts, just minor highlights during my first presentation. But today we will dive into the details of this report. Now, please let me share my screen. I'm sure you are seeing it now.
Yes, we can see.
Yes. Okay. So it is called State of World Volunteerism Report, the thread that binds. Can I hear any views on the second part of the title, the thread that binds? Would you like to share any views on this? Anybody? You can unmute yourself. All right.
Participants, you can mute yourself if you want to answer the question.
Okay, then let's start. Maybe we can discuss about this title as well during or after my presentation. So once again, on behalf of UN Volunteers Program, UN Volunteers Turkey office, I'm sending my best wishes to everyone. It's really my pleasure to be with you again. And
God bless you.
Bless you.
thank you, thank you.
Bless you.
So now, thank you so much. Now, so 2018 State of World Volunteerism Report. And as I told you before, it is the UN's flagship publication on volunteerism. And it is the third in the series of UN volunteers program, and we try to advocate for the role of volunteerism for peace and development. And so the evidence that I will be sharing with you is based on a research conducted in 15 communities around the world with over 1,200 research participants, including volunteers, community members, local government officials, and so on. So the theme of this report is actually very related with our current also days. Is about community resilience. Is about establishing collective action, and which we also needed very much during the COVID response. So first we will talk about who are the world volunteers, but I also shared some of the facts with you in my first presentation last week. Then we will talk about the distinctive ways that volunteerism helps, or let's say hinders, community resilience. Then finally, we will also look how can volunteerism for resilience be further strengthened. What are the ways to both create resilience in the community and also among the volunteers. Now with the okay, and I'm sure you are familiar with these numbers. We went through this before, so it's providing a snapshot again, just to remind you. As I told you before, it is a very complex issue and challenging due to the data gaps, to collecting the volunteer numbers. The volunteering report is, according to the report, there are 1 billion volunteers in the world, and it is equal to 109 million full-time workers. I can assure you that this is the most comprehensive global estimates produced until today, this report. So you can give reference to this report still, although this is a 2018 document. So to put this into context, these numbers, the volunteer workforce is nearly 3 times the number employed globally in financial services, and almost more than 5 times those working in the mining and extractive industries. And I also shared with you before some of the results from Johns Hopkins University's study research with ILO on volunteers' economic impact. And again, the scale of regional volunteering, we also went through this. And as we see, this is a huge resource for peace and development, and of course for resilience. I mean, the human resource itself. I know that you went, I think, through the value of human resource in the previous sessions. I think it was on SDGs and volunteerism. So as far as I know, you also touch upon the human resources values there. And so, as we all know, it is a universal issue. The volunteerism is a universal thing, and people of all ages and backgrounds can volunteer. There are some stereotypes, and I may also would like to ask, but I'm sure you're well aware of these estimates by now. Volunteers in some countries. First, if I ask this to my, in Turkey, if I ask this in Turkey, whom do you think are the compiled of volunteers in Turkey, either seniors or youngsters? And the majority of the citizens will tell me that it is a job for young people. However, I would like to give you an estimate from UK. the majority of the volunteers in UK are actually 65+ year old. Almost 65% of the volunteers in the country. And let me also give another, just a very recent fact from UK. During their COVID response, because of the neglecting of the government's, measures, that they were not upfront with taking quick measures, the society itself also couldn't cope with the situation. And UK was one of the, in quotation, the worst managed countries in COVID response. And when we look to the details of how come the volunteers, although it has a big amount of volunteers, the population in the country, how come they were not upfront, then we saw that it is because of the age limitation, because 65+ were already, locked down in their homes, so they were not able to go and practice their volunteering response. So this is an, I think, very interesting example from UK and the age of the volunteers. And as we know, the vast majority of the volunteer work is 70% is done indirectly, so not involved in any organizations. Just indirectly happens to be, between the people and their communities, and 30% formal. Again, this was an very quickly we touch upon in my first presentation. We highlighted that it is globally the women who take on the majority of the volunteer work, with around 57%, and it is almost the same in every region. And when we look in detail at just the informal volunteering itself, women are doing a lot of the work, particularly related with those that don't get much paid or don't get support. And this is a topic that I would like to elaborate further with you all. Again, another just a more detailed percentages about the women and men distribution on volunteer work. So now, across all regions, we know that globally, the communities told us in this research two main things. First, by its nature, volunteerism is formed around human connections. Of course, we all agree with this. And the second, volunteerism gives people the ability to self-organize around their own priorities. The solidarity, empathy, and connections generated through social actions are protective factors when times are hard. Especially, the volunteers are seen as the glue in the conflict situations, in power of bringing societies, individuals together. And in this research, again, young volunteers in particular valued the opportunity to mix with people from other backgrounds and to also find common solutions to problems. And another fact is what these two characteristics that I just shared had in common is that can anyone wants to tell me maybe what is in common when you look at these two I think
excuse me, please, participants, could you kindly mute your microphones? Thank you. You can go on, Ms. Nir.
Okay, thank you. So when we look to this, the first two, the most common things about volunteerism, we see that in all, communities, volunteerism has brought us from me to us, or from, but not them, not me, but us. So this is the volunteerism actually brings that perception of uniting together. And because volunteerism is part and parcel of the communities under strain, we should also not romanticize this. This is an important aspect I want to share with you. So what do I mean by romanticizing the concept of volunteerism? Well, in fact, UN volunteers, this research showed that each distinctive character of volunteerism could be positive or negative, depending on the context. For example, because volunteering is rooted in social relationships, And volunteering could also be stigmatized or exploitative and burden the most vulnerable. So there is a risk of that too. Because of the power dynamics within the across all communities, meant that women were often taken, just an example, women were often taken on the most of lower status of volunteering. Or for underdeveloped, underemployed youth, for instance, when volunteering was not combined with paid work in the longer terms, it becomes disempowering for the volunteers. And it is a risk, there is a risk of losing a volunteer from the first place. Hence, these kind of dynamics can also entail stigmatization and social judgment on carrying out volunteer work. And for instance, this participant in the field research from Egypt said that we face criticism from some community members reproaching us about having time to waste or mocking us because we are silly enough to work without remuneration. Sadly, our work is depreciated because our work is free. So this is a self-explained quote from a volunteer in Egypt. We can also, I'm sure, discuss about this, paid work and unpaid work, unpaid volunteerism. Does it mean that it devalue the actual amount that volunteers are doing? I think it is worth to open discussion. So now, how can all actors nurture volunteerism for community resilience? We need also, external partners to come together to support the individual volunteers themselves. What do I mean by this? Effective partnerships between governments, between volunteers, other organizations can help to exchange knowledge and skills, and at the same time increase access to resources and bring more equitable standards to local volunteer work. So ultimately, we can say that policies and practices need to focus on ensuring both mutually reinforcing volunteerism for resilience and resilient volunteering. How are we doing now? Do we have any questions on this? Any question marks? What do I mean by volunteerism for resilience and resilient volunteering? I cannot see the chat box now. Hold on. Farid, can I request you to help me on this? If there are any questions, can you?
Of course.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
So, well, I will then make my point more concrete. So concretely, governments and their partners, by partners, we mean all of us, the civil society organizations, private sector, academia, should focus on some aspects. And these are very important to share with you because you are the ones who will advocate for these in your surrounding, and you will be at the positions of the government or private sector, civil society in the short run. So you are the ones who will advocate this. So first of all, national volunteering infrastructure, building national and regional infrastructure for volunteerism that enables all citizens to contribute, including young women and girls, out of employment and education, is important. For instance, on a global level, since 2008, 69 countries have introduced or updated their legislation and policies specific to volunteerism. And during my first presentation to you last week, I asked how many are aware that there are volunteer schemes in your countries? And the majority said that they are not aware. So I also wonder that whether you, did a research on this, and maybe you can update me on your countries and whether you have volunteer scheme or not. Second, we can say that inclusiveness of volunteerism. So ensuring that volunteering happens in an inclusive and fair way. This is important. For example, as an estimate from Spain, I think it was in 2015. So a new law on volunteering was introduced that ensures that open participatory and intergenerational volunteering and affirms that non-discrimination is a fundamental principle of volunteer action. Like this was introduced with a new law in Spain, which is, very, very wide, perspective that covers the volunteers' rights. And as a third point, we can focus to integration in resilience strategies. So this is also another important thing, integrating volunteerism into the national resilience strategies and plans. Like the earthquakes, the COVID response, and all this, we can elaborate this with examples. But in collaboration with UN volunteers and civil society and private sector in Turkey, I can give you an example. Syrian women and host communities are designing volunteer-based solutions for a better access to services and employment opportunities. This is a joint project conducted in Turkey. But besides this, I can also give a very recent example from my country. In the late January, 25th of January, there was an earthquake in Elazığ, in the eastern part of Turkey. And I was also part of that, part of the civil society organizations and volunteers. And we initiated a platform called Civil Society's Platform for Resilience. This was the name of our platform. And all stakeholders, in a very natural, very organic way, very systematically, without knowing each other, took different roles in that platform. This also means that how volunteers, the chart that I just shared with you, let me go back there just to emphasize. So there's a self-organization, as we said. All volunteers came together in that for that earthquake to provide a response, and they were the frontline available people there. And in a very speedy way, they provided response. They were very flexible. All the volunteers, they were very flexible in terms of the jobs that they were doing, or the support that they were providing, or the time management, changing with the shift of the responsibilities. They were very flexible, very creative and innovative in their response. And definitely there was a collaboration was upfront among the response of the volunteers during the earthquake. And again, let's get back to our slide. So this is an important aspect that I want to raise your attention. As the fourth one, youth volunteer schemes. So including youth volunteers schemes, a relevant example also in the work for Educational Volunteer Foundation of Turkey. Again, an example I want to give from Turkey, which implements educational programs and extracurricular activities for children aged 7 to 16. So again, I want the participants in this group to share with me the examples in their countries. Now, a recent example from Turkey is volunteerism is included in the 11th National Development Plan. And hopefully very soon, we will start working on the curriculum of volunteerism. It will be part of the elementary school. It will, starting from the elementary school, the volunteerism will be in our lives.
Sorry for the interruption, Ms. Neil.
Yeah.
Dear participants, if you want to answer the question that our speaker asked, please just raise your hands and I will entertain you. Thank you.
Thank you so much for it. Maybe it will be a repetition for me. Maybe I mentioned it in the first presentation, but related with the age and why volunteerism should be part of the educational, curriculum. I just want to give an example on this to emphasize this effort. A study, according to a research conducted in UK, people, the children who were part of a volunteering activities below age 10, tend to volunteer 2 times more when they come to age 16 and 18. Did I make it clear? So for those who actually have started volunteerism at an early ages, are more capable of conducting volunteerism in their life in the short and long run than people start at the age after 16 and 18. So it is extremely important to include children into the volunteer activities, and what kind of volunteering activities they can do is also another discussion topic that we can, I will be happy to conduct with you after my presentation. So, now let me also give some examples from the role of volunteers and their economic impact. This is also something that we mentioned very briefly in my first presentation. In here, measuring the economic value of volunteering is very important. We discussed this before too. And to highlight the enormous in-kind contributions made by volunteers, we need to do this. But according to some volunteers or civil society organizations, they say that no, volunteerism should not be measured by money or any economical terms, because it's volunteering by its name should not be defined by any economical terms. But in these facts, for instance, from SWVR, we shared the numbers. In here, let's look again. I want to give some facts from our report. In 2017, the research commissioned by the State Department of Social Protection was carried out to determine the contributions of volunteers' work in Kenya. Do we have any participants from Kenya now among us? Yeah, you will update me if there are.
Yeah, we will update you.
Yeah, so the results show that in Kenya, the results show that Kenyan volunteers contributed a total of almost 700,000, sorry, I cannot see it, 700 million hours to the economy in 2016. So their contribution translated to approximately around 2 billion US dollar, or 3.66% of the gross domestic product. And so these are all, very interesting and very high valuable amounts of the volunteers' in-kind contribution. And according to the Bank of England, another example, volunteering is estimated to be worth almost 50 billion pounds to the UK's economy. And in Czech Republic, for instance, statistical survey showed that volunteers provided around 45.1 million hours of service, which equals to almost $6 billion to the economy. And the examples can I can give more examples on this if you ask. For instance, in Norway, regularly published statistics shows that GDP contributions of volunteers in their country. In Turkey, unfortunately, we are not at that stage yet, but we are working to reach there. And also in here, we can maybe elaborate further on this. In some countries, this is the volunteers' contributions to the SDGs. In some countries, close to 50% of non-profit organizations. Well, this is the contributions to the SDGs or contributions to the economy, social development of a country. Let's put it that way. In some countries, almost 50% of the non-profit organizations, the civil society organizations, human resources are volunteers. And in Ethiopia, I think we have a participant from Ethiopia here. There is this report conducted by their government, and accordingly, the Women's Health Army has over 2 million volunteers working to improve critical and basic maternal and infant health care services in Ethiopia. And also another, again, research from UK calculates that 4% of wage premium over the life cycle for some volunteers based on increased human capital, network and volunteering as a desirable character to employers. So I have more examples in front of me, but now I will just leave the floor for questions for Q&A, and because I think from the facts that I shared, you know, we can open it is, you know, it opens to many discussion points that the facts provides us to discuss with you. So that's why I will now leave it to the audience, and over to you, Farid.
Okay, then thank you very much, Ms. Neil, for this valuable and brilliant presentation. Dear participants, without taking much of your time, I would like to open the Q&A session. Please just raise your hands and I will entertain you. Thank you.
Yeah, today by purpose I wanted to give, you know, the facts from other countries, and if you realize, I tried to emphasize on the economic impact of volunteerism and why the volunteer scheme, the government's volunteer infrastructures are key to success.
Dear participant, please could you raise your hands?
I think in the chat
to answer
box
question.
there are some.
Yeah.
Have you discussed about the sustainability of volunteerism?
Hello, could you hear me, please? I think we have a network problem.
So, Papa Banda has shared something. Let's download.
Yeah, and Mr. Karim also raised his hand. The floor is yours. You can ask your question, please.
Merhaba Kerim. I cannot hear you.
I think we have a network problem.
Is it good now?
Yeah, it's good. You can ask your question, please. The floor is yours.
Okay. Merhaba.
Merhaba.
Just to answer a quick question about the title of the report. If you look at the report, and if you go through, I have been through that report since you sent it. It's talk about all the volunteering process, challenges, and everything is related to volunteering. And when we talk about volunteering, it's like all the challenges that happen to the volunteer is like a thread we need really to work on, so we can bind all these efforts and all these challenges and all this work and ideas and everything all together. So if we have one report that indicating and working and getting all this information about volunteering, it will be a really good resource for the volunteerism, so we can rely on if we really want to improve the volunteerism and the volunteering for youth and for the provider as well. And that, of course, can take us to the resilience of volunteerism and volunteerism for resilience. We need the volunteers so we can guarantee the sustainable of our communities. On the other hand, if we don't guarantee the volunteers, we will not be able to achieve these sustainable goals we need. So we have to set our goals, our projects, our ideas to make sure how we can maintain those volunteers, maintain them activated, maintain them educated, maintain them motivated, maintain them well and ready to support whenever they are needed. So when we have them ready and all informed and having the knowledge and organized, at this point, what doesn't matter what goal we have, we are ready with our volunteers in each sector so we can be able to achieve those goals we are working towards. Thank you.
Thank you very much. This is a very, very meaningful, valuable comment. Maybe I can reflect on that, and I, of course, by echoing what you said. So, sustainable development goals, you know, it is a call, as we all know, and asking all communities to come together for the solutions of the universe. And it says that, as you all, I'm sure, know, that there's this famous motto says, leave no one behind. So it gives us the tools, it gives us the, the messages, but how to feel this and how to reach the target is also based on the, efforts of each country. So of course we cannot expect everything from the SDGs and from UN, but it's a very important guidance that provided to the member states. And UN is also, UN volunteer program is also engaging with the governments. According to plan of action, the UN volunteers are encouraging all member states to establish volunteer infrastructures in their country. So, you just said that maintaining volunteers, well-being of the volunteers is important, because we are asking society, come, take part, take an action in finding a solution to this problem. But who is going to, what about the well-being of the volunteers during, during that period, their health insurance, and so on. So that's why UN Volunteers is also encouraging the countries, member states, to initiate the volunteer schemes in their country, so that the well-being of volunteers will also be ensured in the long run. Thank you so much for giving me a chance to also elaborate on this, Karim.
I would like to give the floor to Ali Hassan Hassan. The floor is yours, please. You can unmute your microphone.
Assalamu alaikum, and thank you for such a wonderful presentation, ma'am.
Thank you very much.
Okay, I have two questions. First is this, in our culture, most of the young boys do volunteerism. As volunteerism is doing something selflessly, most of the boys working to provide bloods to the patients. Just before this session, I was attending a meeting, and I was explaining the young boys what are SDGs. They want to volunteer, but they don't know about what are the SDGs and how to work on these SDGs. So I want to ask, is there any platform to engage those volunteers who don't know about the SDGs, and what for us that how we can engage them to achieve these sustainable development goals? Thank you.
Let me make sure that I heard you correctly. You said that how can we, if there are any platforms to teach, the society about the SDGs or not? Did you ask this?
Hello?
Yes.
Yes.
Could you repeat your question, please?
I'm saying most of the boys or young boys do not know what are the SDGs.
They don't know about young people.
They want to volunteer their time. They want to spend money, but they don't know what are SDGs and how to achieve these SDGs. And for me and other volunteers here, we want to engage them in SDGs goals. So how we can engage them to achieve these goals?
Okay. Which country are you from?
I'm from Pakistan, and I'm currently working as United Nations Civic Education volunteer.
You are working at United Nations? Sorry, where?
United Nations Civic Education volunteer.
Civic education volunteer.
Yes.
Okay. Well, actually, I would believe that you also have the answer to this question. But it is important you raise this for other list audience now who are not working with UN, who are not very familiar with the system of UN. Well, so the SDGs, we are in the last decade, and we have only 10 years left to 2030 to achieve the SDGs, and every country should look into their efforts and do a very open monitoring and evaluation on how they maintain their target to promote the SDGs. From Turkey, I can give you an example. Definitely, we are still. I cannot say that we are doing great with SDG outreach. Unfortunately, there are still millions of people in the world that have no idea of what the SDGs are, because they are in poverty and in difficult situations. So as UN, we are responsible in sharing the SDGs with the member states, and member states together with all partners, civil society organizations, academia, private sector, are responsible to ensure that they are taking all the indicators of the SDGs. So quick response to your question is, for youngsters, it is the responsibility of the education system. It should be in the curriculum. And as UNV office myself, I am attending to many universities and promote SDGs and to explain what expected from the youngsters in the society. So it is a responsibility of you. It's the responsibility of me, to express the definition of SDGs. And it cannot be done by only one partner in the society. So, and you had a presentation. A scholar came from I think Qatar, talk about the SDGs. So the things that he shared with you is will be taken further from you to the audience. And the second question you ask.
I asked.
Question?
I was asking that in most of the cultures in Muslim countries, people do volunteering. Like they donate blood,
Yes.
they visit hospitals and help them selflessly. So is it impactful? Mostly such type of volunteerism is not counted in later stages.
Exactly. So the one of the reasons to this is actually when we look to the countries, the Muslim countries, there are no volunteer infrastructure well established, and this is one of the reasons to that. That's why the efforts of the citizens are not counted. So that's why we call it informal volunteerism.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Neil. I would like to give the floor to Omnia Amfer. Please, you can unmute your microphone and ask your question.
Hello, Mrs. Neil. Thank you for your presentation. It was really fruitful. Well, my question is, for example, United Nations define youth as people between the age of 15 and 25.
United Nations.
Yeah, but hence there are fewer opportunities for people under 18. Why don't UNV consider making opportunities for volunteering that are aged under 18, even in a more local level, so that they can increase and so that volunteerism can really part of their personalities and who they are. And thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Where are you from? Morocco?
Yes.
Okay, thank you so much. So in order to become a UN volunteer, you have to be 18 plus because it's a contract, and it is it is a contract that asks you to come to an office space, and so you have to be 18 plus. You have to be independent to work in a UN office. That said, beside this, UN volunteers are working very closely and engaging with the communities and with civil society organizations in many countries to also include, people under 18-year-old into the community works. So there are actually community engagement projects conducted by UNV and civil society organizations where people under 18 can also participate. But they cannot just be a UN volunteer, but they can, be there as a volunteer. But beside this, UN volunteers, or in addition to this, UN volunteers are being part of the solution in a bigger picture, where, working closely with the governments to establish the volunteer schemes, so that in communities, children can also be part of the solution society by volunteering. So we are, working on that as UNV program. But just to wrap up, in order to become a UN volunteer, you have to be 18 plus because of the security issues.
Thank you so much.
Thank you once again, Ms. Neil. I would like to give the floor to Nasra Abdullahi. Please, could you unmute your microphone and ask your question. Thank you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we
Yes.
can hear you.
Yeah, thank you, Ms. Neil. We are so happy to have you again. My question is related UN volunteers opportunities. For example, I have an account in UN volunteers. I always focus on and look for UN volunteers activities. At the same time, there is not much opportunities, especially here in my country, in Somalia. Maybe there are other countries have the same issue. So is it possible you to expand or maximize the opportunities in order some of us get the chance to become part of UN volunteers? Thank you so much.
Thank you. So I think you mean that there are not enough opportunities for you know,
Yeah, yeah.
equivalent, which is equivalent to your CV or your experience, because Somalia is, as far as I know, one of the biggest UNV hosting countries in the world. There are many UN volunteers working in Somalia, but mostly in remote areas or humanitarian response which requires high experience. So I believe you couldn't find a vacancy which meets your experience. So what does UNV do in order to create UNV opportunities? Is, let me give you the background what we are doing. So UN volunteers programs, offices in different countries are working closely with the UN agencies. And we are approaching the UN agencies, or vice versa, they are approaching us to find the right candidate for yes. So can I request you to unmute yourself? I think one of the
Please, participants, just unmute your microphone.
Okay. So for us to create opportunities in different countries is also required the need in the hosting agencies. So UNV itself cannot actually create opportunities, vacancies in the countries. The need has to come from the UN agencies first. But please keep looking. It is. I know that Somalia is one of the biggest UNV hosting countries. There are some also questions in the chat box.
Yeah, but now I want to give the floor to Abdul Latif Lawal. Please, could you ask your question? Then after that, we'll go to the chat box also.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Miss Na. Now, my question is, in a country like Nigeria, we have a very large population, and the youth are really willing to volunteer and participate in the humanitarian activities. So the competition is usually very high here, very, very high. How can someone stand out, not just to be selected as a UNV volunteer, as a UN volunteer, but also other agency or other humanitarian organizations as a volunteer in those organizations? How can someone stand out? What can someone do to improve his qualification and what it takes to be to be selected? Because the competition here is usually high. If you should advertise a role for just 2 people in Nigeria, don't be surprised, you might see 1,000 people applying. So it is very competitive. I believe this training will be an opportunity for you to learn a better way to stand a better chance than other people. Thank you. That is a question. So how can people like us in this country improve our chance of getting this opportunity, even when we have the opportunity? Because the opportunity are there, but the competition is so high. Thank you.
Thank you, Abdul Latif. Well, competition is getting higher and higher. Well, first of all, for the unpaid volunteer works, I'm surprised that that it's also difficult to be a volunteer in an NGO. But I think you don't mean becoming a volunteer in an NGO as a volunteer, but as a paid volunteer. Is this what you mean?
No, either as a free volunteer or as a paid volunteer.
It's difficult. That's well, it means
either
that
paid.
Okay, well then I don't know the picture in your country, but from what you said, I am thinking that maybe there are not enough civil society organizations or enough NGOs or enough social entrepreneurs, and enterprises in your country. Maybe that's why. Because what you're saying is there is a demand. I mean, there is a pool of people who are waiting to volunteer, but there are no enough places to volunteer. I think so. Every country should be, seen from their own conjecture. In Turkey, in order to become, for those who want to become a volunteer, we always, ask them, guide them to reach the NGOs and introduce themselves. And very few didn't manage to get into the NGOs because NGOs, civil society organizations, are willing, are looking for new volunteers. They are in need for, human resources. But if this is the case in your country, how to, how to be in a position to be selected is, yes,
Participants, please, could you kindly mute your microphone?
The same participant. I think it's the same person.
Yeah, unfortunately.
I'm hearing the same voice. But, it is a long journey. It is something that you have to improve yourself and improve yourself nonstop. It is about looking to everything as an opportunity to learn. It is about, looking to conflicts, to challenges as an opportunity that actually you can learn from. You can learn a lot from this. So besides the personal journey that you have to improve yourself in order to become the selected volunteer, you also, I think, have to continue knock the doors of each organization, because I will be very surprised if they tell you that, no, we don't need any help. You are the one who sees a problem. So maybe you can initiate your own social entrepreneur. So, you can initiate your own NGO, you and other volunteers that are not selected. So there's always a solution if you want to take action. There is this word, quote from Nietzsche. He says that the one who has a why will always know anyhow. So it's about, not giving up and knocking every door and just improving yourself as much as you can. But it is a way of, it's a perception. As I said, we have to improve ourselves in looking to the conflicts from an opportunity, from a opportunity point of view, if possible. Think of a fruit tree. In order to the tree to give fruits, that tree has to face the winter and challenges and harsh times. So, I mean, see every challenge as an opportunity and just continue knock every door.
Thank you, Ms. Neil.
I hope it was useful. I don't know. It is because for me it is interesting. I mean, in Turkey, the NGOs are looking for more volunteers. On the contrary to this example.
Yeah, thank you, Ms. Neil. I would like to read the question that I received from the chat box from our brother Ali Hassan. The question is like this: is there any opportunity or aid provided to the new initiatives by the youth to achieve the SDGs? How much experience required to be a youth volunteer? If not, then is it counted in the selection procedure?
Where is the question? Is it on the chat box?
Yeah.
I cannot see the question. Is it a private only to you or?
No, to everyone. You shared the question to everyone.
Okay, yes, because there are more questions on the top. So is there any opportunity or aid provided to the new initiatives by the youth to achieve SDGs? Well, I'm not familiar with the country context. So I will advise you to look into the UN pages in your countries to find out about this. But there is a youth envoy in UN headquarters, and they are working especially on the youth engagement in every country. So, but I cannot now name specifically one by one, but please go into the web pages of UN in your countries for this. And maybe one thing I can share now is this year is UN's 75th anniversary. So UN is 75-year-old. And there is a survey conducted now in every country, especially asking the youth participation is needed, is required. So I will invite all of you. I will also share the link from here, or maybe one of you, while I'm talking, if you search for UN 75 survey, you can, please share from the chat box. This is a good opportunity to share your voice because, SDGs, the difference between SDGs and the MDGs, the Millennium Developing Goals, is that SDGs are from bottom up. So there is a open consultations at the country levels with youth, with women, with elderly, people with disability. So SDGs is more about people's voice. Therefore, please take part in the survey, and this will be a good start. And as a second, look into the websites of UN in your countries. It says how much experience is required to be a youth volunteer. Well, in order to become a youth volunteer, you don't need an experience. I actually shared this slide with you last time. And I think somebody had also shared it among the audience now, participants. So in order to become a youth volunteer, it says 0 to 2 years of work experience, we say. But by 0, it means you don't need any experience. And so it is a good opportunity for young people to engage with UN system. And another question, if not, then is it counted in the selection process? So yeah, I answered your question, but also let me repeat myself from the previous, our presentation with you. We as UN volunteers, we also accept the volunteering and internships as an experience. So definitely, use this as an opportunity. It is counted. There were other questions at the... Yes. Do you want me to read the question now? Is it?
No, I think the question from our sister from Tunisia. How effective is the network of relationships in uniting efforts to achieve the success of the Sustainable Development Goals? How can we develop these networks?
How effective is it? Okay, now I found the question. The network of relationship in uniting efforts. Network of relationship. Okay, to success of the sustainable development. So you're asking that the collective action, how it is important to act together in order to reach the SDGs. Is this the question, Malek?
Ms. Malek, could you unmute your microphone?
Which network are you talking about? From your question, I am hearing that the collective action and coming together in solidarity. Is this what you mean, or?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So how can we develop these networks? Well, this is a very good question, and it shows that the will you have inside you to be part of this to achieve the SDGs. Well, I think it was an anonymous word from Africa. It says, if you go alone, you will go fast, but if you go with a group, you will go further. So I mean, networks and surrounding yourself with the like-minded people, with with people with same values is important. This is I think best thing in life that you can establish, you can build. Try to have an environment, habitat with like-minded people, and if you have those people in your life, then it means that you can reach your goal, because this is called all NGOs or social enterprises are actually combined by people with same like-minded people. So they come together, 3 of them, 5 of them, and they initiate their platforms. So this is extremely important. And I strongly encourage everyone to expand their network with people who share the same values with you. Have you heard of the five people network? Do you know what does it mean? The 5 people. Well, it is very important. So they say that if I ask you, who is the closest 5 people around you? That 5 people actually define who you are. So make sure that you have this, people who believe in SDGs, who believe in volunteerism, make sure 5 of them are very close to you. So this can be a good homework, I think, for all of us.
Yeah, I would like to give the floor to Ahmed Sofi from Egypt. Please, could you unmute your microphone and ask your question? Thank you.
Good afternoon, Ms. Nell, and it's my pleasure to meet you again.
Yes.
My question is how UND affords the security for volunteers, like your example from female volunteer from Egypt?
You mean in my presentation there was a volunteer, quote from volunteer? You mean that?
Yeah, the example of quote from Egypt, a female
Yes.
volunteer from Egypt. What about the security afforded by UNV
Yes.
to their volunteers?
Yes. So that was the quote I shared was just a volunteer, was not a UN volunteer. So first of all, this is a difference because UN volunteers are the well-being of UN volunteers is covered, secured by their contract. Their security, their health insurance is all covered with their contract. So that's a different thing. And but if you're asking me how UN volunteers program are actually supporting the well-being of every volunteer that work on the communities, if you're asking me this, then my response would be, as I said, the UNV program is encouraging and assisting the member states, the governments, to initiate the volunteer schemes so that the rights of the volunteers will be secured. That's indirectly we are supporting those volunteers, and the UN volunteers are already secured with their contract.
Also, I mean the security from mocking or racism, not only well-being.
Mr. Ahmed, we can't hear you. I think you have a network problem.
I mean also, in addition to well-being for volunteers, I mean about their security from mocking or racism.
Mr. Ahmed, could you just type your question in the chat box because we can't hear you?
Yeah, okay.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Karim Kabari from Qatar, I think the floor is yours now. You can ask your question. Please and please, dear respected participants, don't forget to mute your microphones. Just raise your hands and I will entertain you. Thank you. Mr. Karim Kabari.
Yes. Okay.
You can ask your question.
We will talk about the volunteering for kids. In some communities, which are really like very rich communities, when you ask people to volunteer, the question is why? Why should I volunteer? What is the purpose of volunteering? And when we talk about the engaging the kids in volunteering, I really like the idea about putting it in the curriculum so they can really try to understand the importance of volunteering and the value of volunteers. And one of the activities that as a scout leader, I do with the kids, I have been designing programs for the kids to volunteer in different fields and different aspects by contributing in these activities based on the goal. Like, for example, if there's an environmental goal we need to work on, or if something related to the community, we can engage those kids and those students in those activities without being worried about the age or the security of the things, as long as they are engaged in an organized activity as something like scout activities and these things.
Yes, yes. No, I mean, scout activities are actually, that's one of the first, you know, like how volunteerism became very, you know, visible is actually also through the Scout communities. It is a very important, and that's, thank you for reminding that. It was in my notes for my own homework that I would like to actually also engage the Turkish government, you know, approach them and propose this again, because we had Scout communities in schools in my parents' generation, but now it is not very much the case. So I was always thinking to raise that again.
It is, but not that much as like I think last year we have a Turkish delegate from the Scout Federation here in Qatar. But yes, as you mentioned, is not as it used to be. Even when I was young, the number of Scout activities was larger, and we are talking about Egypt is different than Qatar is different than other countries. So yeah, it's still to be more distributed so people can more engage in it, as it's more organized and safe for kids to participate.
Yes, true. Well, hopefully it will be part of the Turkish reality too, with engagement in the curriculum. Thank you so much, Karim. You're very right. There is this also question says that Süleyman is asking, what is the best organization to become a volunteer? This is a very subjective question. I think the best organization to become a volunteer, well, first of all, it has to, it has to meet what is, what is the problem that you want to find a solution to. So the NGO has to be, focusing on that area, first of all, to start with. And besides this, make sure that in that organization, well, it is not always the case, but it is something that we need to reach as societies, that these organizations has to cover the security, the health insurance of volunteers. That's the ideal. And in your during your volunteering experience in an organization, in the first days or weeks, you might be doing things that you don't want to do. But first wait and see. But then if you think that it is not progressing for your own sake, then raise this to the supervisors. But if it's not changing, then change the organization, because you have to also improve yourself while giving to the society. So it should be win-win for both sides. I mean, don't end up serving coffee to the colleagues at the organization only.
Thank you, Ms. Neil. Our brother from the chat box asked a question. He said, you talked of the bottom-up strategy in decision-making in relation to the SDGs. How will that be possible if a good number of the population is not even aware of the existence of the SDGs?
Yeah, wow. Amazing question. I mean, this is the dilemma that we are all facing. I said in my presentation that we are not doing as good as we should be doing, in the beginning. There are still, in the remote areas, there are still so many people that are suffering from basic needs. And it is the responsibility of the UN and the countries and the governments, everyone to respond that. And with COVID, unfortunately, the barriers between the gaps actually even get bigger. But SDGs from the theoretical point of view, and as well as in practice, was still a bottom-up approach. Because I was part of the process when the SDGs were first initiated. We conducted consultations, meetings in different parts of the country, and we met with people who were not being, reached before. So this is definitely a bottom-up approach, but I'm not saying that we are doing great. We still have to do a lot, but it doesn't stop the definition of SDGs that it is a bottom-up. It is a bottom-up because MDGs came from the General Assembly, from the headquarters. They came up with 7 goals without consulting with me, without consulting with you. And they asked the governments to, meet the expectations of the MDGs. But the 17 goals, before establishment of the 17 goals, actually every country were engaged in the process, and they actually provided their inputs. So I know it by heart because I was part of that process.
Thank you, Ms. Neil. Our brother from Kyrgyzstan, Felix, please, could you unmute your microphone and ask your question? Thank you.
Hello, thank you so much for such informative session. You provided such a curious statistics about volunteering age in UK. So majority of volunteers were plus 65. And my question is how to encourage adult people and people who are retired to be volunteer, because they can share some useful skills as well as knowledges to with the young volunteers. Thank you.
Felix, thank you so much. This is a very important question, and especially if you think that in 20 years the majority of also like Turkish society will be you know 65 plus. So this is actually investing to your future, to our future. First of all, I will give one fact from UN Volunteers. UN Volunteers program, in order to reach the seniors and the experts who are retired, now, in order to reach them, UN Volunteers program came up with this modality called expert volunteer. So it is a way to give an opportunity to the people that you just mentioned, those groups. It's targeting that group and encouraging them to again give their expertise to the society. So the requirements are different, of course. There's a minimum 15 years of work experience in order to become an expert volunteer. So UN Volunteers program is supporting this a lot, and therefore came up with this modality. Beside this, again, encouraging the seniors is very crucial, and it's a responsibility, high responsibility of the countries, of the governments. And again, it is related with the volunteer infrastructure. This is why it is high in UK or many other Christian, let's say, countries, is because it is a part of the, so the volunteerism first introduced through church, through religion to the communities. Therefore, if you look also to countries like Germany, you will again see that the rates of the volunteers for the senior volunteers are very high. I regret to tell you that in my country, although it's also in our religion, unfortunately, our fathers are the previous generations have grown up with the notion that after 65 I will finish everything and go to my home, so don't expect anything from me. So we need to change this culture. And therefore we need again the volunteer infrastructures for that, because their security, again, health insurance is key before encouraging them to become a volunteer. But also let me say this, as I said, this is a complex issue. It's not black or white. We cannot give really high statistics about our countries. Like in UK, because there is an infrastructure scheme, they are more eligible to come up with data. But in Turkey or in your country, I also know from my family that the seniors in my family are volunteer themselves. Like it is not in data, it is not in statistics, reflected in statistics, but they are volunteering for their community as well. So we just don't, with the informal volunteerism in our countries are much higher. So that's why that's why I give different answers to
Yeah, I noted that. Thank you very much, Ms. Neil. Now I would like to give the floor to Ms. Rabia Ilyas from Pakistan. Please, could you unmute your microphone and ask your question? Thank you.
Hello, Assalamu alaikum. Very good to see you again, Miss Neil. So my question is, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Please proceed.
So my question is there any way to associate local communities or local organizations working on SDGs with the United Nations agencies?
Yes, there is an opportunity. Well, first of all, UN agencies are conducting projects in the communities. So the communities are very much engaged with UN projects. But if you're asking me how to engage through UN volunteers, there is a contract type called community volunteers. So in order to become a community volunteer, you don't have to know the official languages of UN. We don't
No,
have
my
to.
question, sorry to interrupt you. My question is, can we associate organizations like some volunteer organizations working on SDGs, a team with the United Nations?
Yes, yes, of course it is possible because it is a, the local NGOs, communities, are also stakeholders of UN. Therefore, of course, it is possible. In your country, I will recommend you to reach the UN officials.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
You are welcome. Now I would like to give the floor to Haritha from Nigeria, please. I think she's not here. So I would like to give the floor to Aziz Bek. Mr. Aziz Bek, could you hear us? Hello, Mr. Aziz Bek. Could you unmute your microphone and ask your question, please? I think we have network problem. Yeah. So please.
There is one question here, but I want to ask this question. This was my question I asked to the colleagues here.
Yeah.
Why women are more engaged on volunteering than men? So this is an open discussion. There is no.
Okay. Just raise your hands and I will entertain you. Then you can answer the question. Yeah, Mr. Sage Donfak, unmute your microphone and answer the question, please. Thank you.
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you. Please, go on.
Okay, good morning and thank you for the wonderful presentation.
Thank you.
For our speaker of today. I wish before answering to our question, coming back to one point, the SDGs goes in member state countries. In fact, I've realized that she said the strategies used at the UN is a bottom-up approach.
Yes.
According to me, the approach is effectively good, but there are some flaws that I do observe because here in the west region of Cameroon, many people are not even aware of the existence of the SDG goals, and when you even go by doing some sensitization in that light, people don't really take it serious because relentless efforts are not really implemented at the ground level to see that those goals come to life. So according to me, there should be more emphasis laid in that regard because, those that are really suffering is the base population. The base population is really suffering and they are not really aware of the existence of those things. So their opinion should equally be taken into account when it comes to deciding on how to go about these SDGs. Now, coming back to your question, you asked why girls are more into volunteerism than boys. I think it's because, when we go back into history, we realize that women, the gender, that is the female gender, were looked upon as maybe unequal to men or to the male gender. So when you look at this particular, if you look at this particular problem, it justifies why women today are more volunteering because they want to at least bring up that status quo that states that women are not equal to men. So that is what is really pushing them to go into volunteerism than men. So that's the issue that I can say.
Okay, thank you. Dear participants, please and please, could you kindly mute your microphones, please? Thank you very much. Ms. Neil, do you want to add something?
Yes, was that from Mohammed or I couldn't catch his name? No, he has very important two comments. It is there are flaws and we are trying to fill those flaws. It is, but there will be always a gap. Unfortunately, it is the truth. But of course, if explaining SDGs to people, especially to the people who are in high need, you cannot expect them to cope with SDGs right away, because just think from the hierarchy of needs, pyramid. That's the priority for that person is to feed him herself and be secure. So of course it is a very like creme brulee kind of a topic, SDGs for many people in the world. But us, the young people, the volunteers, we have to make sure that those people are also heard, and that we need to respond their needs. But it is more difficult in the LDCs, of course, in the least developed countries. Unfortunately, I didn't have chance to work in those countries, so I cannot really give any specific examples, but I know there are many projects being conducted and are still conducting in those countries.
Yeah, thank you very much. Now our brother Narmesh from Malaysia. Please unmute your microphone and the floor is yours.
On the women and men, the girls and boys difference, did he say that because of the equality issue between men and women?
Yeah.
There was also one comment, I think.
Yeah.
So in some countries, he thinks that there is no equality between men and women, and therefore,
gender equality.
Kind of seen as a more job to do for women, but not men. I think it was what he said.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. So this is what I understood. Well, the gender gap is is also. I presented this in my presentation. For women in some societies, because it is unpaid, they think that this is a job for women, because they don't have to bring bread, in metaphoric terms, to home, but it should be men. So this is also valid, unfortunately.
Yeah. Mr. Namesh from Malaysia.
Hello.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ms. Neil, for the study session. I'd actually like to answer why women volunteer more, because I'm actually conducting a research on gender equality and gender difference between volunteers. So I would like to answer that because I think that women prefer flexibility of roles in volunteer. As you can see that women, they do prefer a job like which is about they will prefer a volunteering job like a one-off session, or probably a job that doesn't involve days and weeks. Women does prefer that because they need to contribute to probably social work. They need to contribute to their own work, or maybe like their own family house chores. So women do prefer in such way to contribute less than men's, in whereby men's, they prefer to what I would say that men would prefer like to represent themselves in organizations. That's why men volunteer less than women. Instead, women prefer to volunteer in events rather than going for meetings or organization. Yeah, thank you.
Narmesh, can you share that research, your study with me as well afterwards?
Sure, no problem.
Thank you. Well, let me give you and maybe then one fact from UK. It will be useful input for your research, which is a bit kind of making your research upside down, because I mean your input is important. It is more from the adult point of view, and definitely by culture we create more stereotypes. We actually built on that by talking more, by emphasizing more statements like, yes, woman wants flexible jobs. We are building on that. So we need to change the mind shift on this. So this research in UK showed that, maybe it was not in UK, but I will go into my books. They did this research to kids under age 10, to boys and girls, to see, which gender is more feeling close to volunteerism. And they saw that it is girls were actually more tend to provide help to others. So it is also I think gender related thing, but not only the community or the society stereotype, typical perspective, but also there is this more in-depth reason to that, coming from a woman's mature realities, let's say.
Yeah, thank you very much, Ms. Neil. Abdulatif Lawal, you can unmute your microphone and ask your question and answer your answer.
Yeah, on the reason why there are more women, I feel in this part of my own country is because of agitation, gender equality agitation. So there are a lot of NGOs that are working more on gender equality, trying to see women being equal to men. So this creates more rooms for women, and at the same time, it gives women more courage to take part in the voluntary aspect, because most of them see volunteerism as a means to give themselves.
We lost
voice.
you.
We lost
That's
your
one of them.
voice. The network is fluctuating.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you, please. Go on.
Yeah. I think from this part of the world or this part of the country, the reason is because of agitation for gender equality. People or women are agitating for equality. This makes women to be more into volunteerism activities in Nigeria, because there are more of NGOs and or social organizations that are working towards women. There are a lot of applications, or there are a lot of opportunity that are strictly for women, and there are some that are even encouraging women. So in this part, if you even have if your NGO is working towards gender equality, it has higher chance to succeed than other NGOs. So I think that is one of the reasons that there are more women in voluntary activities than men.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. So this is also a country context. In your country, you said that there are more NGOs working for women's rights. It means that there is a big problem, for the gender gap, let's say, and hence there are more women working in those women NGOs or shelters. So yes, it's also may depend variety from different countries. I also know that the percentage of male workers in women NGOs are also relatively high in Western European countries. So, these are all cultural. We have to always look from a cultural perspective into these issues.
Yeah. Mr. Karim Kabari, I think you can answer the question.
Can I, just for curiosity, there are among us people work in the NGOs. Can you please write on the chat box what areas are you working on in the NGOs, civil society organizations? Just I would like to know your interest areas.
Right.
Okay.
Once we are waiting for that, Mr. Karim, go on, please. Yeah.
Yes. If you can talk about one of the positive reasons for women to be volunteer more than men, as they are more passionate and have more passion and empathy sometimes than men. So they care and they always want to help and support. And during different projects, I have interviewed women who work and they have families, but they are still keen to manage some time for volunteering and giving. So it's not just about having free time. It's not just about they are not working and they want to do something. It's about how caring they are and how willing they are to do change or to make some things better as a nature of them as women and girls.
Yeah. Thank you, Karim. You actually emphasized the research done for boys and girls under age 10. It is by nature.
Yeah.
All right.
I think we come to the end. Yeah. Thank you, Ms. Neil. Could you please say your final remarks before I conclude everything?
Yeah. My final remarks. Well, we all talk about, the terminologies, the statistics, numbers, SDGs. I think, share my final words in a more personal level. Just I want to emphasize again, highlight again that it is only your journey and no one will walk, on behalf of you. So don't seek support from others. It is important to, do a collective action and provide a solution to the problems together. It is important, but make sure that you improve yourself in this journey. Never, keep yourself busy with the the demotivating works. Let's say. Always focus on the positive yourself. Only then you can reach your goals. This will be at the very personal level. I wanted to share with you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Neil. Finally, we come to the end of our presentation. I'm delighted to have the opportunity to wrap this very productive session. Dear participants, audience, and viewers, as you are all well aware, most of our programs or projects are digitalized now. So please stay tuned and kindly ask your friends to follow our social media accounts. On behalf of the ICYF President, His Excellency Mr. Taha Ayhan, and ICYF Secretariat, we would like to say thanks again, Ms. Neil, for the informative and productive session, and to the audiences, of course, for their active participation. I would also like to reiterate my utmost appreciation and deep gratitude to the ICYF team for organizing such a marvelous online training program in collaboration with the UN volunteers here in Turkey, Turkish Red Crescent, Hamad bin Khalifa University, Bevel, US State Department, Global One, Medicina. Hopefully, our training session will be beneficial for everybody. Dear participants, I would like to conclude by wishing you the best in your upcoming sessions. Thanks for your attention, and may God bless you all. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum.